What's up, tribe? Thank you for being here and welcome to my channel. Today's post is titled Crisis, and as it's a dialogue between Matias and his higher self, I'll be referring to Matias as me and his higher self as I am. Me. During the alignment yesterday, a serpent master spoke. His presence is already familiar to me, and every day I feel more about how he is about to collaborate with our network. He was the first dark person who came to help us on our initiatic paths along the Nile, and he taught people what unconditional love truly means. Many always hope that he returns because he is very direct in what he says. And yesterday he was, as always. He reminded us that the reptilian brain is the one that knows how to survive in this world. And that if we want to learn to live in harmony on Earth, the first thing we must heal and integrate is that brain, based on hunger, security, survival, the reproduction. Most of us who walk towards the light and spirit of consciousness, we tend to move away from these four concepts, which is why they are the main ones to appear as conflicts. The masters of darkness say, look at us and listen to what we have to explain to you. Sometimes I feel that in the spiritual world, you want to start your house with the roof. When you first have to dig and lay the foundation, every human being is so immersed in basic needs that he does whatever it takes to cover them without measuring the consequences. And in greed, he seeks power, control, accumulation of goods. The teacher yesterday told us bluntly, you blame the reptilians for controlling their lives. But it is time to recognize that you are the reptilians, and that is a great truth. It is humans who act like reptiles, fighting for the most basic needs, as if we were still animals. If that's not a confirmation. That's my brother's German Shepherd in the background. Anyway, back to the blog. As if we were still animals. He told us that if we want to transform ourselves, we must change our skin. And they know how to do it. It is as if we are asking a pigeon for advice on how to crawl on the ground. Only a snake can explain that to us, and we are more similar to them than to doves. He said they will control our systems until we stop acting like children and start taking responsibility without blaming anyone outside for our own hardships. I am. He is right. In his own words, you are precious gems wrapped in your own shit. I know it. His words are harsh but clear, and this truth is overwhelming for most because it takes us out of illusion and makes us put our feet on the ground, recognizing that things are not going to be corrected by thinking beautifully. In the same way as a house that has fallen by a storm will not rise again with prayers. This is a breakdown of belief and value systems. I am, but a break that makes it grow, like when you discover how babies are made, or that Santa Claus does not exist. When you have the first big argument with your parents, when your heart is broken for the first time, or that moment when they betray you, when you have to move from school, home, city, or country, when you have an accident, when you discover that what you've been told is not true, when you are faced with your first epiphany or your first awakening of consciousness, when you fall into the deepest depression. It is as if the mind, the soul, and the body were broken in two. They split in the middle, a before and an after, between consciousness and unconsciousness. I am. It's called crisis. How do you define the crisis? I am. It comes from the Greek krinion and means to divide, to split, to separate. In the mind, the word krinion has given us the concept kriterion, that is, the ability to discern, to separate things, to classify them. Having criteria is knowing how to understand things well and place them where they belong. In the soul, we have the concept of criticism, which speaks of identifying disparities, what is not correct, the harmonic of the unbalanced, and disseminates them according to the tastes, the sensory, and therefore emotional perceptions of each individual in the body, krinion, has given us the word crisis, that is, when we perform an action that separates what is before from what is after, like a path that ends and another that begins. But we call the physical crisis in the same way as the emotional and the mental. An emotional crisis, a belief crisis, a physical crisis. I am. Yes, because crisis refers to the act of a cut with something previous. So it relates to every level where a cut happens. Every crisis is an opportunity to start over from zero, start a new path, but crises are not necessary. And why do we live them then? I am. Because no matter how much people ask for changes, nobody wants to change. To change things, it is essential that all the subjects involved are transformed, begin to modify their way of life, of thinking, of relating to oneself, others, and the environment, as well as their daily activities. For convenience, no one wants to make a transformation. Cells cling to what they can, what they have, and have produced, as a way to ensure survival. So excess energy is accumulated in the form of lipids, so as not to discard anything. If I keep accumulating without transforming my diet, sooner or later, those lipids will go to the bloodstream, generating cholesterol and clogging the veins, causing a heart attack, which we call change. Crises are changes. They are 180-degree turns that place us at the other extreme. So the crises we are experiencing are because we have not been taking responsibility every day for the things that could harm us. And we wait at the last moment where everything accumulated simply acts violently. I am. Transformation is a long journey that involves paying attention to each rock that you step on. becoming aware of where it takes you and which rocks are best to sustain your walk. But if you run on the road, accustomed to it, without paying attention to the moments of transformation that life demands to evolve, then one day you will trip over one of those rocks and you will fall face down on the ground. Because in the comfort of everyday life and routine, you will not see that the road is unfinished. That's where the road splits in two, the break. Me, I've lived it several times. I am. Tell me. Maybe my first big crisis was that day in school when I was 12 years old, when I began to remember my past. Everything changed for me there. My guides had been preparing me, but I did not pay attention to what they were saying with the necessary seriousness. And this changed my way of relating to the outside world. I became introverted, silent, ashamed. But that crisis led me to remember and know everything I know today. Another great crisis was in my 20s at the university, when it was time to start my mission, and I refused. But life forced me to leave it, since I began to channel in the middle of the class and lose control of myself, ending 2 times in the psychiatric hospital of Rio Cuarto. Moment that I understood that I had to go home. And there it all began when they called me to attend congresses, what made me known for the talks at the Utter Tumti. The next great crisis that marked me was during the Harwatem Way in 2012, where in the middle of the way I felt that I was not doing what I had to do, and I got sick. I entered a great crisis when I arrived in Finisterre in June. The end of the Camino de Santiago. There I met Sobek in this life, and it was time to decide to continue alone, leaving others behind. After this, in 2017, on the Dragon Road, when I drove my car from Ushuaia, Argentina, to Guadalajara, Mexico, going to the lakes of the column of the planet, in which I was facing personal preparation, stronger than I lived, tearing apart my mission, purpose, sense of everything, with a company that did not seem to understand what was happening to me, and that I do not blame for it. The road tore me into 1,000 pieces so that I could find the truth behind everything that I was doing. And I seemed to run so that the truth would not reach me, although it was inside of me. In Mexico, I collapsed. I went into a deep crisis that left me in shock and autism for at least a month. This reminded me of my true purpose, the I am. But 2 great crises were missing. In 2018, I would face the strongest love crisis I had when I recognized that soul in Switzerland, which led me to the abyss of emptiness, to nothingness. And in 2019, many misunderstandings and betrayals that in just 1 month took me away from all the film projects, couple relationships, the sponsors of the Yosoy trip, and a large part of my family and friends. I could say that these have been the great crises that I have faced so far in my life. And yet, here I am. Well, the last crisis I no longer experienced as an ordeal, but as a liberation. I am. Why? Me. Because I released a lot of prejudice and expectations, many bonds of dependency that prevented me from being myself. All my crises were very painful, as every crisis is for each person from their point of view. And yet, I can see that I would not have achieved anything that I did if everything remained the same. I realized that all those crises would have been perfectly avoided if instead of continuing to push like a stubborn bull, I had taken moments of contemplation, flexing my mind so I wouldn't have to break it. Crises were never the problem, but it was not having allowed myself to transform myself along the way. I am. The crisis is like death. It marks the inevitable end of something for the undeniable beginning of a new path. Death cannot be avoided, but you can prevent it from happening in any corner if you take the correct precautions, pay attention, eat better, listen, know how to discern, be cautious, go step by step. This way you will live much longer, and what before were crises will become evolutionary leaps. But if you can't avoid them, then take advantage of them. Me, take charge of the crisis. Be responsible for recognizing that one has only been led to such a destination, and one will only be able to overcome such an end. I am. The crisis then ceases to be seen unconsciously as death, to become consciously resurrection. Me, the next crisis will be my rebirth. I am. And so you will stop having to break into pieces, to recognize that they are fractals of the same reality, that you are eternal, infinite, love, in consistent transformation.